different than what we're used to on a normal day-to-day basis and stuff. And so we wanted to share with you guys a recap video. A lot of you guys supported us financially, which was amazing. Taiwan was a very affordable overseas mission trip for us, and we wanted to share with you guys what we did, how God kind of used it, let you guys see some of the pictures and the amazing moments, and then you'll hear from each of us. There was only 5 of us that went, but hear from each of us about what God was doing, what that looks like, and then our missionaries are actually here with us, Bella and Chenga. Bella's here from Colorado originally. We've known her forever. Chenga is actually from Oregon and then went over to Taiwan. I would make up stories about Chenga over in Taiwan all the time, randomly to the kids there of like, oh no, he's not from Taiwan, he's from Oregon, he's from the United States and stuff. And so it was great. So with that, let's go ahead and let's show the video real quick. All right, let's have the team come up here real quick. Yeah, go ahead, Shane. Grab the mic.
Yes, it does. Oh, and this one works.
Okay, that one works too. Hello. Does that work? Can you hear me?
We're getting there.
We're getting there. I can just talk.
Yeah, no, because we're recording, so you have to have it in.
Okay, fine.
We're getting there.
We're
Just keep talking.
okay. I'll keep talking. So, the overall trip, the mission was for us to go to an English camp and teach these kids English, and that was kind of our expectation. And when we got there, I quickly realized I couldn't teach them anything about English because of the language barrier. So we had to rely a lot on our teacher assistants, our TAs. So then I kind of adjusted and acclimated and was like, okay, the point is going to be to kind of build a relationship with the TAs and build rapport with them. And since I can't teach them English, I just need to show them love and kind of be a silly American adult and play games with them and show them just the love of Jesus and what that means from over here. That was the point of the trip. Somebody in the very beginning told us that it's not going to matter what we teach them. They're not going to remember what they learned from us. They're going to just remember how we made them feel. And that one stuck with me, and I tried to go throughout the whole trip that way and just think, and if I got frustrated or if I got off track and thought that I wasn't teaching them anything and accomplishing the mission, I would just ground myself or remind myself that it's just how I'm going to make them feel. So let's show them love and make them feel amazing. And playing with the kids was just an incredible blessing and a privilege, and I was so honored to go on the trip. Want to go next?
No.
Jonathan? Okay. This one's working really well.
All right. So I'm going to speak for Juliana and me because she's not a public speaker. It was amazing. I've been on multiple missions trips. I've been to Mexico and built there were recovery centers for people who failed to cross the border. And this was Juliana's first missions trip ever. And I think it was an amazing experience for both of us as a couple to grow closer together as well as growing closer to God. And we had some major obstacles. When we were in Washington, getting ready to get on our 13-hour flight, I got a call from my doctor with a diagnosis of diabetes, which is why I lost 40 pounds in 2 months. So that totally changed how I was going to go because I was excited for the food with Andrew. And I wasn't allowed to eat any of the sugar stuff because of Shane. But with that, we have an amazing team. And Hannah took up and helped me out. Shane helped me out. Juliana and Andrew also, like everybody was watching out for me and making sure that I was checking my blood sugar, and we bought a blood meter so that we could monitor it. And once we got that, within a few days, I was able to see where my body sat, and it was amazing. God took care of it. I really felt like I failed my TAs and my students because I was physically struggling during the process. And on the last day we were there, my lead TA basically said that I did an amazing job, and I was really able to bond with the kids and bond with the TAs because every day I asked God to give me that strength to get through it. And when I felt, she saw me rise up and triumph over what I was dealing with, which was just an amazing experience for me, and an amazing example of how God works through us. Juliana, when we were there, she for the first time was able to share her testimony and encourage others to continue working and trying to share the gospel with those who didn't believe, who believed in the other gods and other spirits and stuff. And so that was a really cool experience for her to be able to share her testimony and grow in the Lord in that way. And so we're just extremely grateful for this opportunity that you guys provided for us.
There's so much I could say about the trip. It was an incredible experience, as people keep saying. This is my first time ever in Asia, my first time ever leading a team and being the point person. And so I was out of my depth, I felt like, from day one. And it took a whole army of people to help me kind of get everything together and organized. And so specifically, I want to thank Bella and Chengda, because without them, this trip would not have happened. So please give them a round of applause. Their hospitality, their willingness to go above and beyond and checking in. Oh, do you need milk tea? Oh, we're going to go get tea eggs because Andrew's always hungry. And, just from Airbnbs and navigating things and making sure that we were taken care of. Man, we were so blessed by you guys. So thank you so much. Your church is incredible. Thank you for letting us go in and get to speak. I would say probably my favorite highlight of the entire trip, and there's so many of them, was if you don't know, this one is full of surprises all the time. All the time. If you are friends with him, it is an exciting trip. If you are close to him, it's an exciting ride. And being married to him is next level. While we were on the flight home, all of us were starting to feel like we're starting to come down with something and not feeling super awesome. So there was that to it too. But we're like 5 hours from Seattle, and he taps me on the shoulder and says, "I need to get up." And so he let him out, and he stands up and immediately just blacks out and falls flat onto the airplane floor. And I'm like, "Oh, this is happening." So, and he was out for almost 90 seconds. We could not get him to wake up. I'm doing a sternum rub. I'm pulling his beard. I'm slapping him. "Wake the up!" And he would not come to. And so, praise Jesus, there was a nurse and a doctor on board, and they very quickly pushed me out of the way, which in hindsight, I'm very thankful for. I was very mad at the moment, but I'm very thankful for now. But it took probably about 20 minutes of them working on him to get him back to where he was more cognitive and functional. When we got back to the stateside, he was checked out by EMS, and they couldn't find a reason for it, whether it was getting sick or changing cabin pressure or lack of sleep, and they don't really know. But what I remember most about that moment was just sitting there in the back, and my team, Jonathan and Juliana, crying and praying, because we were all sitting together. He felt like in the only spot, praise Jesus, that was wide enough to fit him. He fell right by the medical equipment, which is also a blessing. But my team, they're sitting there praying. Julian is bawling, and Shane just keeps looking at him and then looking back at me and going, and then he'll turn around and he'll go, "We're okay." And then a few minutes later, he would go, "Yeah, we're good." And so I just kept watching my team pray and take care of my husband while I was standing in the back. And that is the testament of what this team did, is we just had each other's backs, and whatever we were going through, whether it was health stuff or hitting our wall culturally or just being extra tired or feeling out of our depth and not knowing how to talk with our TAs or just whatever, the unity that God built within our team is something that I've not experienced in a long time. So the end of everything, he's fine, praise Jesus. Andrew was so excited. He goes, "Oh, Juliet, it's so sweet. You were crying for me." And she goes, "I wasn't worried about you. I was worried about Hannah." So thank you guys so much for supporting us on this team. It was truly, truly life-changing, and we could not have done it without your guys' prayers and support and generosity. So there's people that go, and there are people that send, and they are just as vital and important. And so thank you guys for collectively being the sender. So round of applause for our church. All right, that's enough from us. We'll let him talk.
Bella, Chinga, why don't you guys come up here and share a little bit?
Yeah, what really happened?
Yeah.
So we're never allowed back. Also, Caleb is the best baby in the world. Just so you guys know, he's our buddy.
Go right there.
I want to kind of second what Hannah said about unity. We have friends who, they were on a 10-month mission trip, I guess you could call it, and they came back very divided. And I remember thinking, wow, I feel like the whole point of an outreach is to be unified because it's what shows Jesus' love. That Jesus says, you'll know my disciples by the way they love. And so I just loved seeing how this team actually liked each other still after the trip in Taiwan. Even and Taiwan is very, very hot, and you nonstop sweat. And so no matter what you're doing, you're uncomfortable. And these guys were amazing, right, Caleb? They were just amazing the whole time. And so I'm really thankful that they came, and it really, I think, meant a lot that Andrew came because he was the first person who ever discipled me and really like challenged me into missions and taught me how to read the Bible. And then he came to kind of see my life in Taiwan. And it was really just important to me that Andrew and Hannah came. And so thank you for also letting your pastors leave for so long to kind of come and support us.
I want to say thank you for the kids who that allow their parents to go. They're a really big hero. It's hard to like taking Caleb with the team to serve together, but I think that worked well. I also want to say that the place we serve in is a lot of like around temple. Like every block probably there's temple kind of cover that place. So just like we can go there to serve the camp, and all the camp, like the student probably not Christian, and all the TA probably 80% is not Christian. So like when we go there, we dance, we use their worship song. It just like light up that place, that little place, little county, and just a blessing. So yeah, thank you all the church that support and prayer, and yeah, it's just amazing. And even I think Shane mentioned about like just one, like your moment there, it can bring some change. You don't have to like go there for like 10 months, 3 months or more, but even just like a 2 weeks can just like change someone's life. I remember, I still like, they probably connect with the TN and want to bring more stuff to them and just like bless them. And I think that also one like why I want to be a missionary, because one missionary all the way come from Brazil to Taiwan and like really changed my life, and that's why I'm here. Yeah, so praise the Lord.
Thanks, man. Thanks, guys. Anything else? Okay. Let me do my thing. All right, kiddos, if you guys want to head back, you guys can head back now. You guys did a great job. Thank you for sitting through all that and everything.
You're not going to do the door, face on it.
Wait for Miss Catherine, apparently. For me, that was my first international mission trip. I've done one other mission trip with teenagers. We went to an Indian reservation, which was also very interesting. But this was an eye-opening mission trip in that, because generally when we talk about missions inside of the church and what missions looks like for the church overall, there's usually a few questions that kind of come to our mind that we'll be asking of like, well, why are we going to another country? I'm not a missionary. Like, why should I honestly care? What type of impact does this actually have? Especially when you think about what we did, where we went overseas and we were teaching English, which you heard from Shane. We actually didn't really do a good job of teaching English to anyone there. When we got there, most of them already knew English very well. And so me and Shane took it on them to teach them slang. And so they learned some words that were very different than what was in their normal vocabulary overall, all appropriate for the most part. Shane also taught them how to gamble. So, yeah. Which gambling is illegal in Taiwan overall. So, but Shane did an underground little network there with some of them. So if we see a bunch of them in jail with tattoos now we know what happened. So, but like, what type of impact did you actually have going on that? Like, you didn't go, like, when we think about missions, usually we'll think about going to like a third world country and building something and doing something like that, right? When Haiti happened, tons of Christians would go on missions and go over to Haiti and try to help out. Well, we didn't really do that. What did we do? What type of impact does something like that even have? And a lot of that comes down to our confusion about the point of missions. Missions goes hand in hand with the task that we all have of discipleship. In Matthew 28:19, go therefore and make disciples of all nations. Panta te ethne is when it says like of all the nations. And the idea is of all the people groups. Of all the people groups there themselves. So the idea is wherever you're at, you're making disciples within the people groups, within their culture, within what they understand and how they make sense of the world. That's what culture is, how you make sense of the world. And culture will start at the family, that's the deepest, most simple level of culture. When a baby learns language, all right? The way we teach that child understanding what language is, of saying dada for the first time. And then when the baby starts figuring out how to kind of put those words a little bit together and they say something that sounds like it, all of a sudden the dad's face lights up and there's a reward of like, oh, yes, say it again. And they start figuring out like, this is how the language of the culture within inside of our family works. And then that expands farther out into the friends, into the community, into the local area, into the nation of what is accepted, what isn't acceptable. In Taiwan, we learned a lot of these different things, sometimes the hard way of what is and what isn't acceptable, all right? Being a very large bearded man that's sweating like crazy, walking down the streets, and Shane has this video of me, like I clearly stick out. I mean, I am just dripping in sweat, standing there like this, just observe, I have no idea what anyone's saying, and I'm just looking back and forth, just wet, confused, and just chugging down different teas, all right? And I stick out for a reason, because like tattoos, not a huge thing over there. One of the TAs was explaining like their test they have to take, like they're very, very smart. These kids are so smart. And in middle school, they have to pass this certain test that tells them what high school they're going to go to. And they want to do very well because then that gets them into a better high school. If they don't do well, what she said, is then you go to the high school where the guys have tattoos. And I was like, all right. I get the underground message of what you're kind of saying to me there. And so there was like certain things of like, oh yeah, you don't have tattoos. With your chopsticks, you don't put them straight up. You have to put them on the side. Putting them straight up was a cultural thing of like, you don't do that. That's disrespectful. There was a ton of random things. Trash. Like, Taiwan is incredibly clean. Very, very clean. And so with your trash, you throw it away all the time. And I was trying to play a prank on Shane, just giving him my trash because I didn't want to carry it anymore, because also there's not many trash cans. In America, there's like a trash can every 5 foot and we still miss it somehow. In Taiwan, it was so hard to find trash cans. And I tried to give it to Shane, like in his pocket, and like a bunch of the TAs were like, teacher, you don't do that. And I was like, I'm just playing a prank. They were like, you don't do that. And so I learned very quickly of like, this is what's acceptable in the culture. Most of what I do is not acceptable in the culture. And so when we're going into the nations and making disciples, what we have to learn is how to have our cultural eyes open, a cultural intelligence to observe, why is this so radically different? What makes this so different, where I can then, what people say, contextualize the gospel. We have to contextualize the gospel, where essentially what we're doing with contextualization is where we are taking what defines as tailoring the gospel to the social context in order to achieve a greater understanding. So contextualization is taking the gospel, what Jesus did, what Jesus has said, and contextualizing it, having it fit and form in a social understanding way to that society. And Jesus did this all the time. When you read about his illustrations, the stories that he used, why he used some of those stories. God did that with his people. When we're talking about the covenants, the covenant was not a biblical concept, that was a cultural concept that people understood. And it was a legal binding term that they used. So God used that to help relate himself to a people group that didn't understand the idea of worshiping only one God. Paul did this multiple times. In the book of Acts, in chapter 17, Paul is in Athens and he's observing the culture and he's observing all their different gods and he's asking questions from the people there. He's wondering, okay, why do you worship this God? Who is this God? And he relates the gospel back to their context. In 1 Corinthians, which is probably one of the books that we're going to be going through shortly, when I say shortly, once we finish David, which will be in like several months, but most likely going through 1 Corinthians, what he says in 1 Corinthians chapter 9, he says that I have become all things to all men, that if at all possible, I might save some. The idea that I have, to the Jews, I become like the Jews. To the Greeks, I become like the Greeks. And this is difficult for many of us because in our culture, especially in our Western culture, we live in an age of outrage where we get irritated by things that don't line up inside of our bubble. Oh, you're a liberal. Oh, you're a Democrat. Oh, you're a Republican. You're these things. And we don't pause to see people from their point of view. And we lose the ability to contextualize the gospel. Missions is so important because it takes you out of what you're used to, what you're understanding in this spot, and you're in a new area where you have to try and evaluate why is the culture functioning this way. Culture is constantly changing. And the only way for you and I to participate in that change is to be creative. The culture is constantly changing. We've all seen that. Everyone has talked about that. We can talk about how fast the culture is changing right now. We can talk about the youth and the next generation and alpha with skibbity toilet and all these new terms that you're throwing around. And you're like, this is so stupid. And we're trying to understand what that means, but it's constantly changing. And you and I, our only option is to participate in that change by being creative in what God has asked us. One of the things that I want us to try to do in our table talks is to observe what's called a cultural artifact, something in our culture that has come about. You could look at TikTok, you could look at iPhones, you could look at trains, you could look at highways. Chris loves trains, so Chris, we could look at trains and talk about how that's changed. But we can look at the cultural artifacts and evaluate a few questions on what type of impact it's had. We want to ask, what does that cultural artifact assume about the way the world is? What does it assume that the way the world should be? What does it now make possible? And what does it now make impossible? Or in other words, what parts of the culture is now impossible to go back to? We can look at the idea of remote work, for instance. What does that assume about the way the world is? It assumes that the world has internet, that the world can connect this way. When you're talking about Zoom and the ability to have those Zoom connections. What does it assume about the way the world should be? Is that there's no need for you to travel. Is that you don't need face-to-face meetings. It assumes that everything that you can do in person, you could do through a screen. What does it now make possible? Well, it makes it possible where we, on our mission trip, getting prepared, we're able to see face-to-face Bill and Chingda. It makes it possible we're able to see face-to-face our bosses, our CEOs, employees, we're able to hire across all these different places. What does it now make impossible? Well, despite how corporate feels, it does make it almost impossible to make going back into work mandatory. It does make, and it's starting to make it very difficult for real face-to-face interactions on how do you deal with conflict face-to-face and not putting someone on mute when you're frustrated. It starts making certain things impossible in the culture. And when we observe and we see how those things are changing, then we can get creative in what God wants us to do with that. Because there's 3 ways you can respond to the culture. You can respond to culture in a condemning way. And this is where we've seen the ideas of boycotts of a movie, of a store. And honestly, that doesn't seem to very much work. You think about places like people groups who have tried to completely condemn a culture, like monks or the Amish. And the impact that they have on culture overall is very minimal. Now, there are certain things that we as Christians have to condemn inside of culture. So I'm not saying there's never anything we should ever condemn inside of a culture. There are things that are purely wicked and evil. But there is a point that it may be useless, that maybe you're stuck inside of the way you perceive the world right now, and you need to be part of the world. What Paul says, you need to become all things to all men to understand how it works. Parents is not enough to say, I don't understand social media, I don't understand how it works, and it's just stupid. You have to be part of that because it is now part of our culture and it will never go away. But you can redeem it. You can redeem back the culture. The other way that some places have tried is countercultural, where we provide something else. This falls short because it's usually offering something that this cultural artifact has presented, people enjoy it, and when we try to present something countercultural, it doesn't fulfill that need of what it was originally meeting. It doesn't work very well. Purity culture is a good example of this, where Christians came in, we saw what was happening, we saw the sexual revolution, and we introduced something called purity culture, where we tried to offer something countercultural. And we've seen the backlash of what that's looked like. Well, you don't date Christians ever. It left a pretty empty void for a lot of people inside of the church. It created a lot of issues, and it created people wanting to hide authenticity, hide their failures, hide what they've been going through. In history, we've seen that happen with Christendom. When nations would get conquered in the name of Christ, and they'd be like, well, you can't do that anymore. Well, what else are we? This is part of our culture. This is who we are. And they didn't offer anything else. And so that's where you begin to see in the Catholic Church these merging of mysticism and all these different things that came about where people didn't buy in because we didn't offer anything in exchange that was of value within inside that culture. But redeeming and a transforming culture is where we evaluate, we see what it is, and we redeem it back for God. Okay, we have something going inside of our culture. How can we make it great for God? The arts, the Christian arts, and just the ability for Christians to be artistic. When you think about in Europe, that was not originally Christian. So much of the arts was Greek and their philosophy behind it, but the Christians brought that in and said, well, how can we bring God's story to a people who can't read? And so they'd paint the story of God. They'd give these wonderful illustrations to help people try to see and understand it. And it was creative and it was beautiful. We think about how hymns would work originally, that they were bar songs and people understood and people knew them, they understood, and they began to, hey, here's lyrics that glorify God in this. But the only way they would have known that was if they were in the bar and they heard the songs. They were part of the culture. When Eminem first came out, those of us who are old enough to remember it, there was a lot of backlash inside of the Christian community. And we got KJ52. Some of you guys are immensely going back of like, oh man, I remember those songs. And they weren't good, all right? But some of that came about, and we've seen the change in culture where there's some decent music coming now because people took time to listen of like, well, wait, what is Eminem saying? Why is he so popular? In one of my college classes, I actually had to listen to multiple songs by Eminem to figure out what about his lyrics made him so popular and so powerful. But so often we're like, no, it's evil, it's condemned. And a lot of what he said was evil. It is not great, but there was something that was connecting with people, something that was very real about his authenticity, his lyrics, what he was talking about. It related to people that were at the bottom in life. We can take the idea of consumerism. We all know it's a problem with inside of America. We can complain about it, we could try to boycott it, but it's here. It's going to stay. But we can be creative. Life is not about waiting for the market to offer some thrilled experiences, but for us to actually be someone who makes something beautiful and true and good for the world. This is culture making. Consumerism is waiting for the market to give me something to fulfill my needs. What God says is, I've already given it to you. You go and make something beautiful and give it back to the world, and people find fulfillment in that. That's culture making, where you are taking that back and you are redeeming it back, because culture is constantly changing, and the only way for us to participate is to change in the way we are thinking and being creative. The antidote to being a mere consumer is to becoming a creator instead. How has God equipped us to create? What's powerful about this mission trip is that we went there and we didn't go as white saviors. We went there as just white friends, big bearded white friends. And we had these conversations with people down there. And at this camp, Marcus, the guy who leads the camp, he had no desire to do anything with kids ministry. He didn't want to do anything with kids ministry. But as he lived in the culture, as he saw what was happening inside the culture, he saw how the people would all come together for one thing, that the nation wants to become bilingual. And I think it was bilingual by 2028 is the goal-ish. I mean, it's government, so, it'll happen. So, but the people all came together for it. And he saw this, and he saw the need. And what he did is he contextualized the need of what people were saying. We need to learn English. Okay, you'll learn English, but you're going to learn the Bible stories in English, so that you start associating the English language with Bible stories. So as you're having to practice it, as you're starting to read it, as you see certain words of life, of living, of truth, you associate that with the Bible, with God. And it's small, subtle things and how God redeems and changes within inside of a culture. Now, you and I, we don't have to do something big and crazy like that. What we need to do is observe the cultural artifacts, ask those questions, and figure out how we can redeem back a culture. To be creative in that. And the way Jesus did that, he did that with 3 people to start. He invited 3 people into his life, and they saw his family culture. They saw who God was and what God promised. And he invited them into that. Then he invited 12. Then into the crowds. And those 12 began to teach and understand and bring this broader picture of culture out. And then you saw it change the whole world. It changed the Roman Empire overall. Their whole motives, their whole perspectives. But it just started with discipleship. But a key aspect in discipleship is vulnerability, of letting someone see you and you seeing them fully, and being able to discuss how do we contextualize the gospel in our lives, in our families, in this moment. There's a great book that I encourage everyone to read. The Gospel Comes with a House Key. And it talks about the power of being hospitable, of letting people into your life, giving someone else the keys to your house that they could come in at any time and see how you do life. We as Americans, we don't let people into our lives. We don't let people see our lives. We let people see parts of it, but we're very individualistic. And the idea of a tribe, of a community, of anyone being able to come in and see who you are at any moment scares us. But all Jesus tasked us is just start with a few people that you know, that you could invite into your life. And you'll see the way they did life, the way they do life is very different than how you and I do life. And you start contextualizing that. And you start questioning even the way that maybe you've been doing that. Is this the best way? Is this what God has called us to?